Hi there, and welcome again to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Today, we dive into probably one of the oldest arguments in the shooting world, which is, are the guns of yesterday better than the guns today? But first, before we get into that contentious topic, here's a quick word from our great sponsors. Introducing the 4 Patriots Solar Go Fridge, a revolutionary solar-powered fridge on wheels that can protect your food, drinks, and medicine during power outages. This is not an ordinary cooler. The Solar Go Fridge is a refrigerator, freezer, and deep freeze all in one. It can recharge for free in sunlight and even power your phone in a pinch. Plus, its portable design means you can take it with you anywhere, ensuring your essentials stay safe and cool while camping, fishing, and hunting. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the amazing Solar Go Fridge. Don't let a power outage catch you off guard. Just go to 4patriots.com and use the code GUNMAG to get 10% off. Creedmoor Sports is your destination for all things precision shooting. Whether you're new to the sport, an experienced target shooter, or a die-hard competitive shooter, Creedmoor Sports has what you need to take your game to the next level. Visit creedmoorsports.com. Hello again, Roy. Thanks for joining us yet again on the Guns Magazine podcast.
I feel like, what was that movie with Bill Murray? Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
It's like, here we are again.
Yep. Well, it's easy for me because you know everything there is to know about firearms and you're an easy interview. So yeah, I guess I'm maybe being lazy, but as you know, when you conduct interviews, it can be a real challenge sometimes, especially somebody you don't know. And, you think they're going to be a good interview. And then it's like, this is pulling teeth.
Oh, I hate that. It's like you ask them a long question and they go, yeah. It's like, okay. Could you elaborate on that for me a little bit, please?
We did that when we were policemen. And I think that's why former cops that are writers now do a good job, because that's your job as a cop. You're talking to people every single day, witnesses, victims, suspects. And two things would always happen generally. Most folks are pretty normal, but you'll get that guy. Okay, sir, you were standing right here when the aircraft was shot down by the terrorists and it crashed into the orphanage and it exploded. Can you tell me in your words what happened? Yeah, the plane crashed.
I've been there.
Okay. Or the other person is, can you tell me about this? Well, I got up in the morning and I had my usual half slice of toast with butter. Yes. Normally I use margarine, but on this what happened in the last 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, I was driving to the bakery. I was going to get a roll.
Well, you know what I learned is that I learned this from having raised a 3-year-old is you don't tell the 3-year-old, what would you like for dinner?
Right.
You ask them, would you like chicken or broccoli? Right. And so I learned that when you're interviewing people, don't give them those open-ended questions. Can you tell me what happened? Start. What color was the race of the person? Black. Yeah. Okay, there we just made a step forward, right? Exactly. Or white or Mexican, whatever it was. Can you tell me what color the car was? Blue. Thank you. How many people were here? And then, eventually you could get the information you want. Then at the end, you can say, is there anything else you'd like to tell me about it?
Yeah.
But if you tell them what happened, it's like, they don't know where to start. Have you ever had somebody write down a statement after an accident? Like a traffic accident? I tried doing that every once in a while just because it was interesting more than anything. And so most people cannot write their way out of a wet, paper bag. I seen the car, but I didn't know what to do. And my dog was barking. So we hit it, but it was an accident.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, now that we've started with this critique of interview techniques, we will get into our topic of the day, which will probably inspire even more comments than what we just talked about. And that is, Roy, do they make them like they used to? And this was inspired by a recent conversation I had with a young engineer from Ruger. And it was a fantastic discussion that we had sitting around a campfire. And it was really fascinating to hear his take on things and where he thought the industry was going. But we have talked about this before, that we are living in the golden age, but yet the stereotype is, well, they just don't make them like they used to. Well, my theorem is, yeah, they do. And in fact, they're making them better. But Roy, you've been in the industry a lot longer than I have, and really a lot deeper than I have. What's your take on where we stand today? Are they better than they used to be, or the classics still the classics?
Yes, no, and maybe. I mean, I think I agree with you, but this is the renaissance of gun making, because frankly, you look at a Nighthawk custom, a Les Bear custom, the list goes on, Kimber, whatever. These are the best renditions of those designs that I've ever seen, ever. Mm-hmm. I think one of the powerful things that we have going for us with modern gun making is consistency. So when you get this gun made, it's not so much a crapshoot that it's going to be good like it was 75 years ago. I mean, because the difference between assembling guns from parts and old guys with the green visor on, sitting at a tall workbench by a north-facing window, how was his mood that day is how he fit that gun, and that's why that custom gun making industry grew so big. It was because it was gunsmiths fixing all of the broken guns from the factory. Now, yes, there were beautiful guns made. I have pre-war Colt, Target 38s, and they're just beautiful, and the bluing is blue and the polishing is, beautiful. But to make a gun like that today would probably be $10,000, and people just wouldn't spend that,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yes, maybe, and no. I think in many cases, serial number 15 of the original Winchester Model 70, if you found it somewhere and picked it up, it would either have like a good trigger, it may not have a good trigger.
Yep.
I mean, it may shoot 2.5 inches, it may shoot 1 inch. But today you can pick a Ruger American rifle off the rack at random. 20 racks of 308 Ruger American rifles, and any of them will shoot 1 inch, and all of the triggers will be good. And, so I understand it's like the good old days, but let's do this. You ready? Which cars are better? Cars from the 30s or cars from today?
Yeah.
And I don't know very many people would say, oh, cars from the 30s, I mean, were cars from the 30s pretty? Yes. I had a Packard. Absolutely beautiful. Would I drive it across country? Nope.
Nope.
So you have to think like that. Was there art back then? Was a pre-war Colt? Was a 1920 blued, 1911 a work of art? They were beautiful. But give me a modern gun if I need to fight with it.
Yep. And that was the point that this engineer made, is today we assemble guns, whereas before we had to build them. And he made the exact same statement that, if you had that guy that had been working there 30 years and it was the middle of the day and he was feeling good, he would take every little extra bit of detail, when he was tuning a revolver or just whatever he was doing, versus today where a lot of this comes from CNC, computer controlled machining. Or computer machining control, whatever, you know that better than I do. But basically these machines that are run by computers, and as long as the tools are sharp and they've been replaced on a regular basis, every single part that comes out of that machine is almost identical. And the tolerances are very small. Tolerances today are almost non-existent. And so, as you said, every single gun coming off of these, they put all the parts in a bin. They go to an assembler, a row of assemblers. They put it all together, do their checks, and every gun is going to be first to last. So, maybe they were a little more beautiful, or it's cool to think of the hand fitting involved and polishing and all that. But today, they're actually probably better. And I know people's a few people's heads have just exploded all over their computer screen or in their earphones. But I think it's pretty undeniable.
It's analog and digital.
Yep.
To this day, people say, "Oh, well, LP vinyl, it has a richness and everything." Well, there's people have scientifically studied them, and that's just not true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't a warmth there. It's your psychology. It's you're remembering high school, and they used to listen to this record in high school, and so it makes you feel good, so it feels better.
Yeah.
Digital music properly done is better. It's more reliable. There's no pops and cracks. But so it's analog and digital. And so the old guns were analog, like that Ruger engineer said, these were manufactured by guys that were old like me. If I do an action job on a Smith & Wesson revolver, and then I do another action job on another Smith & Wesson revolver, guess what? They're both different.
Yeah.
I mean, they both may feel good, and they both may have roughly the same, weight of pull, but one's going to feel a little bit different than the other one,
Yep.
And one cylinder is going to open up a little bit smoother, maybe, and it's unavoidable because it's art, it's analog. It's me working in my wood shop with a hand plane, as opposed to my planer, my electric planer. An electric planer will plane a board and be completely flat over the whole 24 inches of a board. And if you take a dial caliper and measure it, it's within thousandths, the length of it. Now, if I did that same thing with my hand plane, I would eventually end up with a board that was pretty much flat, And a lot of people would look and say, well, I love the fact that it has some plane marks on it. And it's, and so, yeah, that's true. That's art, and it's analog. But, I was visiting Smith & Wesson one time after they would really fired up the CNC stuff. It was in this huge room, and there was like 100 CNC machines. And so we were touring, and there was a guy that was doing side plates on a CNC machine, J-frame side plates. I remember that. And he had this like whole, huge bin full of them. I mean, there was thousands in there, and he had a digital caliper on his desk. And I said, can I borrow that? And he said, sure. So I started measuring side plates, all the different dimensions that I could measure, right? Well, they were all exactly the same, I mean, within a tenth of a 10,000th. I mean, it was stunning, the only time it was not right was when there'd be a little burr or something,
Yeah.
But the next stop was the ceramic polishing thing. They were like these big vibrator polishers. And when you get them out of there, all the burrs are gone. Everything is exactly perfect. And so then I had a new game. So whatever CNC machine we would stop at, I would say, hey, can I borrow your calipers? And it was like, bingo, one after another. Everything was exactly the same. And
wow.
Well, that's why, when they assemble the guns, they don't have a lot of parts that don't work,
Right.
So the people at these desks, they take a hammer, a trigger, a this, a that, put it together. The gun works, and guns being analog though, yes, one might have a little smoother trigger pull just because of there's tolerance stacked, right?
Sure.
So if you're a 10,000th here and a 10,000th there and and then pretty soon you're 1,000th and a revolver is the difference between a nice action and a not nice action, so it can still happen. But I've talked to some old school gunsmiths, guys who were in their 80s. This was in the 70s, and these guys were in their 80s, right? So I knew a couple of guys who worked for Colt, and they would readily admit that nothing fit. In other words, when they got hammer trigger, nothing fit. If it went together, it was a fluke. So each action was done by a human being with a stone and a file, and a magnifying glass. So,
and if they were having a good day and everything was hot, straight, and normal, you probably got a really good action. But we've all been there. It's like, I can't believe they're going to make me work overtime, and my wife's on my butt, and the kids are, rotten. And Well, now maybe that action is not quite up to par.
Well, and it's an interesting point too, because if you look at, and I may get shot by people manufacturing in the industry for saying this, but if you look at the polymer and synthetic pistols, well, it's impossible to hold these kind of tolerances,
right?
And that's why if you pick up polymer pistol A and polymer pistol B from the same manufacturing lot, the triggers will feel different, probably, Yep. And because there is that tolerance stacking to a great degree with these guns, because you're asking steel and aluminum and plastic and polymer to all play well together, and so, that's why you don't have that. When was the last time you heard anybody say when they picked up their polymer pistol and the slide runs like a oiled bank vault?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And the trigger is crisp, like the proverbial glass rod.
No. See, that's why like Apex triggers for drop-in trigger sets for the polymer guns are huge to me. That I put them in everything because it does make the trigger more reliable. But they do that by using tighter tolerance parts and pins that are made to fit and all that kind of stuff. So so there is that. Well, is a revolver, will it work better? Probably than a production revolver in the old days. But the auto pistol, I have a feeling, if it's polymer, I think that the older steel guns could probably chase it for quality right out of the a box. But having said that, a polymer gun will probably run perfectly. Like my $5 socket set. So
yeah. Well, I had this was a really fascinating conversation because I said, now, what do you think? Because he's a younger guy. Where do you think we're going technology wise? And he says, really, technology wise, it's going to be, we've reached that plateau of design and tooling so that there's probably not going to be anything on the level of shifting from black powder to smokeless or anything like that. He said that what's going to be different is materials. And for instance, MIM, which is metal injection molding. When they first started doing that, it's easier for the manufacturer because you're not machining parts, you're molding them. That used to be kind of I don't know about that. And now some of the parts, like the Python, has parts that it's uniform hardness all through, and it's almost indistinguishable from a machine part. So he said, you're going to see more of that. He said, and 3D printing. And he said that, you see a sloppy thing that you've printed at home using, the plastic polymers and all that. He said, that's going to get so much better. You're basically going to be printing the guns in the future. So, we'll probably still be having this argument in 50 years of, well, these printed guns today are not the same, but our not ancestors, our offspring, down the road be going, yeah, but the tolerances are down to a millionth. And,
a couple of years ago it shot, excuse me, I was visiting SIG and we were having a marketing meeting with the staff there. And they always bring in a couple of the engineering geek guys, of course, because they're so proud of what they do,
And they are. Every company.
And I always enjoyed having them there because, I'm a geek gun smithy guy, and so I would used to really love talking to them about, well, how'd you do that? And stuff. Sometimes they say, well, I can't tell you. Right.
Yeah.
But in this meeting, they put a suppressor on the table and it was this amazingly intricately cut suppressor. And I picked it up and it was light. It was feathery. It was titanium, I think, right? And I said, how on earth did you make this? Can you tell me? And the engineer said, 3D printing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have never guessed in a million years. This thing was beautiful, And so that led me to believe it's like if the Navy tells you their submarine will go down to 800 feet, how deep does it really go? Right?
Exactly.
So if they're showing me this, I just wonder, where is that technology really?
Yeah.
I know I heard of a manufacturer experimenting with ceramics right now. Mm-hmm. And ceramic on ceramic doesn't wear like steel does. And, of course, that means you need different lubes.
Yeah.
and different springs and different, but that's really interesting.
Fascinating. And, sidebar, I actually said after the conversation that, man, I need to get you on the podcast. And all of a sudden, we'd been relaxing. We were having a beer in a really cool bar. And he was there, another engineer, and some other folks, and one of their main marketing folks. And as soon as I said interview, well,
I
we
don't
could
think
probably
so.
do. Yeah, exactly. And it'd have to be vetted. They were happy to have him on, but I got the impression that we would do it over video and there'd be a team of lawyers waiting, sitting there vetting every statement out of his mouth, and probably with a tranquilizer gun in case he started to go someplace that he shouldn't. So they're very protective of those folks. And I guess it makes sense because it's a big investment in what they do and the top secret stuff they know.
Well, I've been to CZ in the Czech Republic, and I think I was there about 20 years ago, and the massive facility there. It's unbelievable. And so you go in one room and it's full of CNC machines and guys in white coats, and computer things on they're tacking in things and all. It's all, clean, right? And then we would go in another room and it would be kind of grungy and greasy. And there was a bunch of manual mills and manual lathes and drill presses and stuff like that. And people were working. And so I asked our host, I said, well, what on earth do you use this for? And they said, well, some things you still have to do the old way. That we haven't yet been able to make this work with CNC, and sure enough, I went over there and it was just like women are actually turning things on mills or, or in lathes, with manual feed and stuff like that. I'm guessing that's probably changed significantly now, but I was just surprised by that.
I don't think I'm talking out of school. This engineer worked for Ruger, and he's part of the Marlin project. If you weren't aware, when Remington Arms went bankrupt, Ruger bought all the intellectual property. And I said, did you just buy the designs and all that and the name, or no, we got the factory and the whole shooting match. So I was saying, so how much of the stuff did you end up using? And he said, we've got it all. I said, that wasn't my question. How much of the machinery? And we're using one or two of the pieces. So that told me right there that under the previous regime, the quality control was probably down a little bit. And I can attest to the fact the new Marlins, the one I've got shoots like a house of fire, and an inch or less at 100 yards with factory ammo, and they run like a degreased bank vault, and some of the other guns at this event did the same thing. So I thought it was pretty fascinating, though, that they were very nice about it, but it was reading between the lines. It was the old stuff was pretty much worn out, and we're not using any of it. So that would explain, in one case, why these new guns are absolutely better than maybe the stuff from 10 years ago. So,
that's interesting. You should say that. And it's not surprising. But about 20 some odd years ago, Colt was for sale again, and I spoke to someone from Smith & Wesson, and I said, why didn't you guys buy it? Because it was cheap. It was like $20 million. It was laughable. And they said, well, actually, we went and we looked at it and we looked at the factory and we looked at the tooling and we looked at the machines, and we realized in order to meet our quality standards, we would have had to basically replace all of the machinery and all of the tooling.
Yeah.
And he said, plus we would inherit the union, which was an interesting thing, because if it was within a certain 100 miles or something, then you had to also accept the union. If they were going to move it across the country, you didn't have to accept the union. And so Smith & Wesson was not unionized. I still think they're not unionized. And so they didn't want to take that on either. But the big thing was Colt was selling guns then,
Yeah.
using that machinery.
Exactly.
And you wonder why they had quality control issues.
Yeah. Well, and to your point of the outlier, though, they said, and I forget what it was, but there was some machine that did something specific to lever actions, and it was built in like the 50s, and they're still using it because nothing today really comes close to whatever it is this machine does. And they're working on a new updated design, but they said, yeah, that's the one thing we have to do, whatever this operation is, because that machine works as good or better than the modern stuff we've come up with. So it's kind of a mix, I guess.
Well, I saw this. It was at Smith & Wesson, and I don't know if this is still the same because this was some years ago, but the shop floor is greasy in places with all these old, big hydraulic machines and stuff like that. But it was a rifling machine, and it was old school, and it was the same thing. I looked on the casting; it was like 1934, and they said we still use it because it still works really good.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of an older guy who was running it, and it was really analog because he would pull the cutter through and then stop and then mic it, and then hone a little bit, then put it back on the machine and pull it through. It was kind of reassuring. Actually, a really interesting thing about that is that a lot of some of the factory floor is wood, and it's 4x4 sections, like maybe 8 inches long, vertical. So picture like a brick roadway kind of, right? Only this is end grain 4x4 wood packed. I mean, hundreds of thousands of these, right, on the floor. And they're all black because of grease through the last 100 years.
Yeah.
I said, well, why don't you change that? And they said, well, because it works just fine. And if you have an issue, if there's a problem, if something heavy falls, you just take those out, put new ones in.
I'll be darned. Huh.
Yeah. I went, oh, that's a good idea. So sometimes old school is still good school.
Well, on that very point, I was going to say, I was at the Savage factory 2 or 3 years ago, and they're very modern, and we got to walk through all the processes. But I always remember this. They had a guy that had worked there 40 years or something, and he was the barrel checker. And they used
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And they used a very simple optic device that I still don't quite understand, but they said the principle is very simple. And this guy, with every single solitary rifle barrel coming out of that factory, checked it, and most of them had a little bit of a cant or lean or something, and he literally just kind of, would take a tool and bend it just a skosh to get it absolutely perfect. And that kind of explains one reason why Savage factory rifles tend to shoot pretty good. So
is that the guy to where it's like there's this almost looks like a ship's wheel that's up in the air? Yeah. And they put the barrel in, they look down it with some kind of mirrors and optics. I agree with you. I looked at it too. And he said, do you see the shadow? And I think I got what he was talking about. And then he would turn.
I did that thing of, sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah. What you said. And then he would turn a crank and it would actually bend the barrel slightly. Yeah. And then he said, look now, and you'll see that the shadow is gone. And it's like, okay, that's cool. So I actually learned the real reason why, at least at that time, Savage rifles were accurate was number one, this barrel straightening. Everybody does that, but I think they've got, this guy's been doing it for 150 years, so he really knows what he's doing. But the other thing is that they have the Savage rifles, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the new ones are like because I haven't seen one in a while, but they have that nut that's attached the barrel to the receiver. There's a nut there that adjusts. Well, I was watching this guy, and he'd put an action down, put the barrel in, screw it in, tighten the nut, put a bolt in the gun, drop a go, no-go, cartridge in it, gauge, and pull it out, adjust the barrel, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, until the headspace was adjusted perfectly, right? And so it didn't matter how worn the machines were. It didn't matter if this bolt was this X amount of, spec. he was able to readjust that headspace. And so, because normally what they do is that they go in with a chamber reamer, it's like chamber ream, and then the bolt goes in. Right. Well, if your reamer's worn, it's going to be different, eventually. So I just went, "I'll be damned." So that's why all of your guns seem to shoot like laser beams,
Yep.
And they let me build a rifle. Did you build a rifle when you were there?
No,
they let me build a rifle. Oh, not really, though. What they did was I spec'd one out, and then they basically built it and took it apart. And then I went from position to position to position and then put it together, kind of. But really, you could do that because everything was fit. Everything fits. There was one or two things where I said, you know what? Why don't you do this, and I'll watch over your shoulder. But when I was done with that, it took 2-3 hours, I guess, for the process. And we went upstairs, and they've got 100-yard. It's a tube that goes across the top of the factory. You probably saw that. And so, so they put a scope on the gun and they zero it on the little machine, right? And so I took the rifle. I went upstairs. Oh, we had a proof round through it first. We had to go do proof fire bang. And I took it up, and the next 5 rounds went into a little less than half an inch at 100 yards. It was a 223. First 5 rounds out. I just went, oh my goodness. I just learned all kinds of stuff,
Yeah. And the final thing is what's funny. You and I have been on countless factory tours. The stuff, there's always some kind of secret. And they'll have a machine that's got a tarp over it, or no, we can't go in that room or something. Yeah. And they make it very clear that they're trying to be nice. They want to show you everything, but there's certain stuff you're not going to see. And I always get a big kick out of that.
Have you? And there's been more than one occasion. I've toured someplace just a couple of years ago, and we were walking, doing CNC machines, and there's this and there's that, and he's showing us something, and then as he walks away, he went, "You didn't just see that, okay?" What? We don't know what you're talking about. So pretty funny.
Exactly. Well, Roy, it looks like we're out of time, even though this has been a fun discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, I would invite you to leave a comment. Are the new guns better than the old guns? And I'm sure that'll be a rather contentious discussion.
Prepare, let the ruckus begin.
Exactly. But we don't always answer every comment, but we do try to check them when we can find time between committing journalism. But I think this one would be a pretty entertaining string of comments. So check that out if you're watching us on YouTube. And anyway, Roy, this has been great. And this is one of those conversations you tend to have sitting around with an adult beverage and discussing and cussing and discussing, as they say. So it's been fun. And once again, I really appreciate you coming on the Guns Magazine podcast.
Well, we were missing the adult beverage portion of this.
True.
All right. Next time.
All right. As always, it was great talking to Roy Huntington, and I think you can make the case that we might just be living in the golden age of shooting right now. Before we go, I'd like to remind you to visit our great sponsors. For all of your preparedness supplies, visit 4patriots.com. That's the number 4, the word patriots.com. They carry all kinds of stuff, including the amazing Solar Go Fridge. Keeps your stuff cold, frozen, and you can even power your phone. That's the number 4, the word patriots.com. And if you use the code GUNMAG at checkout, you get 10% off your first order. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code GUNMAG. And if you're into long-range shooting, hunting, or just precision riflery in general, make sure you visit Creedmoorsports.com. They've got everything you need to get your bullets in that one hole. That's Creedmoorsports.com. Well, on behalf of everybody here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you once again, now get out there and get shooting.